The lung channel of hand tai yin originates in the middle jiao in the region of the stomach. It descends to connect with the large intestine, then ascends through the cardiac sphincter of the stomach. It penetrates the diaphragm, passes through the lungs and ascends to the throat, and then descends laterally to come to the surface at lung 1, located inferior to the centre of the hollow of the deltopectoral triangle. The lung channel then ascends through the deltopectoral triangle, descends along the lateral border of biceps brachii, passes through the transverse cubital crease lateral to the tendon of biceps brachii, descends the anterolateral aspect of the forearm to lung 7, which is more radial than the other lung points on the forearm, passes through the wrist joint at lung 9, and terminates at the radial nail point of the thumb at lung 11. The large intestine channel of hand yang ming starts at the radial nail point of the index finger. It ascends the radial aspect of the hand and forearm, passes the lateral end of the transverse cubital crease, ascends the anterolateral aspect of the upper arm, passes anterior and inferior to the acromion process, traverses the top of the shoulder, passes through small intestine 12 and do 14, moves anteriorly to the supraclavicular fossa and crosses the sternocleidomastoid. It connects with the Ren channel in the centre of the mentolabial groove, encircles the mouth, passing through stomach 4, connects with the Du channel at Du 26 in the philtrum, and crosses to the other side of the face, terminating at large intestine 20 in the nasolabial groove, level with the midpoint of the alanasi. A deep pathway travels from the supraclavicular fossa to connect with the lower Hercy point of the large intestine at stomach 37. The stomach channel of foot yang ming commences at large intestine 20. It ascends to bladder 1 to connect with stomach 1 in between the eyeball and the infraorbital margin. The stomach channel descends the anterior aspect of the cheek directly below an eye looking forwards. It moves anteriorly to connect with Du 26, passes laterally to the edge of the mouth at stomach 4, and then moves anteriorly to connect with Ren 24 in the centre of the mentolabial groove. The channel swoops around the jaw and up onto the corner of the head at stomach 8. There is a deep pathway that connects stomach 8 to Du 24. A branch of the stomach channel then descends from stomach 5 along the anterior aspect of the sternocleidomastoid to the superior border of the clavicle. It then moves laterally to stomach 12. From stomach 12, there is a deep pathway to Du 14. The stomach channel descends from stomach 12, 4 sun lateral to the anterior midline, passing through the nipple to the 5th intercostal space. It then moves medially to descend the abdomen 2 sun lateral to the anterior midline to stomach 30, on the superior border of the pubic bone. The stomach channel then moves laterally to descend the anterolateral aspect of the thigh, passes through the knee lateral to the patellar tendon, descends 1 finger breadth lateral to the anterior crest of the tibia, zigzags out and up to stomach 40 at 2 finger breadths lateral to the anterior crest of the tibia, passes through the anterior aspect of the ankle joint, traverses the dorsum of the foot, and terminates at stomach 45, the lateral nail point of the second toe. A deep pathway descends from stomach 12 to connect with Ren 13 and Ren 12 and passes through the stomach and spleen. Another deep pathway ascends from stomach 30 to connect with the pyloric sphincter of the stomach. Another deep branch descends from stomach 36 to connect with the middle toe, and a final branch connects stomach 42 to spleen 1. The spleen channel of foot tai yin starts at spleen 1 on the medial aspect of the big toe. It ascends the medial aspect of the foot, passing inferiorly and anteriorly to the medial malleolus. Ascends the medial aspect of the lower leg, half a finger breadth medial to the medial crest of the tibia. Ascends the anteromedial aspect of the thigh, passing onto the abdomen, where it meets with Ren 3 and Ren 4. It ascends the abdomen 4 sun lateral to the anterior midline, moves medially to connect with Ren 10, then ascends the chest 6 sun lateral to the midline, passing through lung 1. The spleen channel descends to terminate at spleen 21 in the 7th intercostal space below the apex of the axilla. A deep pathway ascends from Ren 12, connecting with the heart. Another deep pathway ascends from Ren 10, enters the spleen and stomach, and ascends to spread over the lower surface of the tongue. The heart channel of Han Xiao Yin originates in the area of the heart, connects with the heart and lungs, and comes to the surface at heart 1 at the apex of the axilla. The heart channel descends the medial border of biceps brachii, passing heart 3 at the medial aspect of the transverse cubital crease. The channel then continues to descend down the forearm, passes through heart 7 at the wrist joint, crosses the palm, and terminates at the radial nail point of the little finger. A deep pathway descends from the heart to connect with the small intestine. Another deep pathway ascends from the heart, passes laterally to the esophagus, connects with the face and cheek, and terminates in the tissues surrounding the eye. The small intestine channel of Han Tai Yang starts on the ulnar aspect of the little finger. It ascends the ulnar aspect of the hand and forearm, passes in between the olecranon process and the medial epicondyle of the humerus at small intestine 8, ascends the posterior aspect of the upper arm, moving laterally to meet with large intestine 14, and ascends the shoulder, zigzagging across the upper aspect of the scapula, connecting with bladder 41 and bladder 11 on its way to connect with Du 14. A deep pathway then descends through the supraclavicular fossa, passing through stomach 12. From stomach 12, a branch ascends the lateral aspect of the neck, passing in between the angle of the mandible and the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid. The channel then moves onto the anterior aspect of the cheek, directly inferior to the outer canthus at small intestine 18. A deep pathway then ascends to connect with gallbladder 1, wraps around the ear, and comes back out to the surface directly anterior to the midpoint of the tragus. Another branch connects small intestine 18 to bladder 1. A deep pathway descends from stomach 12, passes through the heart, stomach, and small intestine, connects with Ren 17, Ren 13, Ren 12, and then descends to the lower leg for the lower Hersey point of the small intestine at stomach 39. The bladder channel of foot Tai Yang commences just medially and superiorly to the inner canthus of the eye. It ascends the forehead and once into the hairline, moves slightly laterally before travelling across the head to the nape of the neck at bladder 10. From bladder 10, the inner bladder line passes through Du 14 and then descends the length of the back 1.5 sun lateral to the posterior midline to bladder 30 on the buttock. The channel moves medially and superiorly and descends through the sacral foramina. The channel then moves laterally to pass the midpoint of the transverse gluteal fold at bladder 36, descends the posterior midline of the upper leg, moving laterally to bladder 39 on the popliteal crease, just medial to the tendon of biceps femoris. From bladder 10, the outer bladder line descends 3 sun lateral to the posterior midline all the way down to bladder 54 on the buttock. The channel passes laterally through gallbladder 30 and then descends to reunite with the previous branch at bladder 40 at the midpoint of the popliteal crease. The channel then descends the posterior midline of the lower leg, moving laterally to pass posterior to the lateral malleolus. The channel moves along the lower aspect of the foot to terminate at bladder 67 at the little toe. A deep pathway separates from bladder 1 and connects with the do channel, passing through do 24 and do 20 on its way to reunite with the primary channel at bladder 10 at the nape of the neck. Another pathway separates from do 20 and wraps around the ear. A final deep pathway connects the primary channel to the bladder and kidneys. The kidney channel of foot Xiao Yin starts beneath the little toe and crosses the sole of the foot to kidney 1. It traverses the medial aspect of the foot, making a little circuit posterior and inferior to the medial malleolus. The channel then ascends the medial aspect of the lower leg, passing through spleen 6 and kidney 10 at the medial aspect of the popliteal fossa. It then ascends the posteromedial aspect of the leg to the coccyx where it meets with do 1. It travels deeply to pass through the spine, kidneys and the bladder, then comes up to the surface at kidney 11, half a sun lateral to the anterior midline on the superior border of the pubis symphysis. The kidney channel ascends the abdomen half a sun lateral to the anterior midline, with deep pathways connecting to Ren 3, Ren 4 and Ren 7. At the rib cage, the channel moves laterally to 2 sun lateral to the anterior midline and descends to the base of the clavicle. A deep pathway ascends from the kidneys, passes through the liver, lungs and the heart to join with the pericardium channel and Ren 17. Another deep pathway ascends from the lungs and terminates at the root of the tongue. The pericardium channel of hand Jue Yin originates in the centre of the chest and connects with the pericardium. It moves laterally and comes to the surface at pericardium 1 sun lateral to nipple in a male. The channel then descends the upper arm in between the 2 heads of biceps brachii and descends the forearm in between the tendons of palmaris longus and flexor carpi radialis, passing through the wrist at pericardium 7. The channel passes through pericardium 8 on the palm and terminates the tip of the middle finger at pericardium 9. A deep pathway connects pericardium 8 to the ring finger. Another deep pathway separates from the pericardium, descending through all 3 jowls. The Sanjiao channel of hand Xiao Yang originates on the ulnar nail point of the 4th finger. It traverses the dorsum of the hand and travels up the forearm in between the ulna and the radius. It then passes superior to the olecranon process and ascends the posterior aspect of the upper arm. The channel travels across the superior aspect of the shoulder to pass through do 14 and moves anteriorly to descend through the supraclavicular fossa to connect with the pericardium and the 3 jowls. This deep pathway comes back up to the surface at Sanjiao 16 on the posterior aspect of the sternocleidomastoid. The channel then winds around the ear to Sanjiao 21, anterior to the supratracheal notch. The channel then moves anteriorly to terminate in a notch at the lateral end of the supraorbital margin. A further deep pathway separates from the Sanjiao channel of the ear, connecting with bladder and small intestine points on its way across the forehead to descend through gallbladder 1, traverse the cheek and terminate at bladder 1. A deep pathway descends from the pericardium, passing through all 3 jowls to connect with the lower Hersey point at bladder 39. The gallbladder channel of foot Xiao Yang starts lateral to the outer canthus and moves posteriorly towards the tragus. It curves up onto the corner of the head at gallbladder 4 and then moves back inferiorly towards the ear for gallbladder 7. The channel then curves posteriorly behind the ear to gallbladder 12, posterior and inferior to the mastoid process. The channel curves anteriorly around the head to gallbladder 14 on the forehead, and then curves back to gallbladder 20 below the occiput, in between the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid muscles. From gallbladder 21, on the apex of the trapezius, the channel moves posteriorly, connecting with DO14, and then anteriorly to the supraclavicular fossa. It zigzags down the side of the torso, passing towards the genitals. The channel passes through the hip joint and moves onto the buttocks at gallbladder 30. From here, the channel descends the lateral aspect of the leg, passing anterior and inferior to the lateral malleolus, terminating at the lateral nail point of the fourth toe. A deep pathway descends from the supraclavicular fossa, connecting with pericardium 1, passing through the liver and gallbladder, encircling the genitals, moving posteriorly to connect with the sacral foramina, and connecting with DO1 before reuniting with the superficial channel at gallbladder 30. A final deep pathway separates from gallbladder 41 to connect with the liver channel on the big toe. The liver channel of foot Jue Yin originates on the lateral aspect of the big toe. It ascends the dorsum of the foot, passes anterior to the medial malleolus, intersects the spleen channel at spleen 6, and ascends the lower leg anterior to the spleen channel until 8 Sun, where it then moves posterior to the spleen channel. It ascends the anteromedial aspect of the upper leg, passing through spleen 12 and spleen 13, encircles the genitals, and passes onto the abdomen, where it connects with Ren 2, Ren 3, and Ren 4. The channel then moves laterally to liver 13 at the free end of the 11th rib, and terminates at liver 14 in the 6th intercostal space, 4 Sun lateral to the anterior midline. A deep pathway separates from liver 13, curves around the stomach, enters the liver and gallbladder, spreads in the lung, and meets with pericardium 1. Another branch ascends from the liver, crosses the neck, comes onto the face, passes through the eyes, and ascends the vertex of the head to meet with DO20. A further branch descends from the cheek and encircles the inner surface of the lips. The Ren channel arises in the lower abdomen in males and in the uterus in females, and descends to emerge on the perineum at Ren 1. The channel ascends the anterior midline of the abdomen, chest, throat, and jaw to terminate at Ren 24 at the centre of the mentolabial groove. A deep pathway wraps around the mouth, connecting with DO28, and descends to terminate at stomach 1. Another deep pathway arises in the pelvic cavity and ascends along the spine to terminate at the jaw. The DO channel originates in the lower abdomen and comes to the surface of the body at the perineum. It ascends the posterior midline of the back in between the spinous processes until reaching DO16 at the base of the occiput. The channel continues to ascend the posterior midline of the body, passing over the vertex of the head and descending the forehead, passing through yin tang on the glabella, through the tip of the nose, and descends to terminate at the junction of the upper gums and the lip. Deep pathway separates from DO16 at the base of the occiput, passes through the brain, and reunites with the primary channel at DO20 on the vertex. A deep branch of the DO vessel originates in the lower abdomen, descends to the genitals and the perineum, winds around the anus, ascends the interior of the spine and connects with the kidneys. Another deep branch originates in the lower abdomen, winds around the external genitalia, ascends the anterior midline of the body, passes through the heart, ascends the neck, winds around the mouth, and ascends to the middle of the eyes. That's brachii. Descends the anterolateral aspect of the forearm to lung 7, which is more radial than the other lung points on the forearm. Passes through the wrist joint at lung 9 and terminates at the radial nail point of the thumb at lung 11. The large intestine channel of Han Yang Ming starts at the radial nail point of the index finger. It ascends the radial aspect of the hand and forearm, passes the lateral end of the transverse cubital crease, ascends the anterolateral aspect of the upper arm, passes anterior and inferior to the acromion process, traverses the top of the shoulder, passes through small intestine 12 and do 14, moves anteriorly to the supraclavicular fossa and crosses the sternocleidomastoid. It connects with the Ren channel in the centre of the mentolabial groove, encircles the mouth, passing through stomach 4, connects with the Du channel at Du 26 in the philtrum, and crosses to the other side of the face, terminating at large intestine 20 in the nasolabial groove, level with the midpoint of the alanasi. A deep pathway travels from the supraclavicular fossa to connect with the lower Hercy point of the large intestine at stomach 37. The stomach channel of Foot Yang Ming commences at large intestine 20. It ascends to bladder 1 to connect with stomach 1 in between the eyeball and the infraorbital margin. The stomach channel descends the anterior aspect of the cheek directly below an eye looking forwards. It moves anteriorly to connect with Du 26, passes laterally to the edge of the mouth at stomach 4, and then moves anteriorly to connect with Ren 24 in the centre of the mentolabial groove. The channel swoops around the jaw and up onto the corner of the head at stomach 8. There is a deep pathway that connects stomach 8 to Du 24. The lung channel of Han Tai Yin originates in the middle jiao in the region of the stomach. It descends to connect with the large intestine, then ascends through the cardiac sphincter of the stomach. It penetrates the diaphragm, passes through the lungs and ascends to the throat, and then descends laterally to come to the surface at lung 1, located inferior to the centre of the hollow of the deltopectoral triangle. The lung channel then ascends through the deltopectoral triangle, descends along the lateral border of biceps brachii, passes through the transverse cubital crease lateral to the tendon of biceps